This first presentation will discuss academic writing. One of the things to consider when writing academically is the structure of your essay. When you use the academic writing essay structure, you want to make sure that you include an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. An introduction should contain a thesis statement and give an overview of exactly what will be discussed in the paper. For most academic papers, a well-developed paragraph is sufficient for an introduction. Sometimes, however, these first paragraphs may be longer dependent upon the length of your paper. For example, if you have a 2 or 3 page paper, one paragraph is all you need for an introduction. If you're writing a 100-page paper, you're likely going to need a significantly longer introduction. For the purpose of this class, one paragraph will usually suffice. A body develops the writer's major points, giving explanation and support where appropriate in order to achieve the writer's purpose. We'll go into more detail on this later. A conclusion summarizes or brings a paper to an end by tying all of the major points together. A good technique is to relate the conclusion to the introduction. Many people often get confused on what they're supposed to do with the conclusion, and they think they should just restate the introduction altogether. However, that's not the purpose. The purpose is that tying together to make sure that people understand how things now fit together once you have laid out the entire body of the essay. So keep that tying thread in mind whenever you're writing your conclusion, and also keep in mind that you're supposed to be reminding readers why it is important for them to now do something with the information you've given them. You also want to consider the structure of academic writing. Make sure that you organize your ideas into paragraphs and write in complete sentences. Fragments are unacceptable for all purposes of academic writing. State your thesis, which is your main point or the roadmap of your paper, in the introduction of the essay. The thesis statement is a topic sentence that names and narrows the topic. The thesis specifies exactly what points will be discussed in the paper and in what order. You also want to make sure that you use proper perspective and tone. You use third-person perspective, specifying the subject of every sentence. Use of the third-person perspective means that you are writing from an objective perspective. For example, you're not giving your opinion. You're not saying I, because you're just laying out information. Here's an example of third-person perspective. The director gives orders to all employees in the department. Name the persons involved or use titles. Do not use I, you, we, or us statements until the assignment guidelines permit it. There will be times whenever you will be permitted to use I and to use you, because those are great to use in certain types of writing, but whenever we're specifying academic writing, please refrain from using those terms. Again, you also want to use a semi-formal academic tone. Make clear, direct statements. You don't want to be extremely dry, but you do want to be clear and direct. You also want to make sure that you're using the proper voice. Active voice is the voice that is preferred for academic writing. Here's an example. The HR manager distributed the forms to the hospital employees. So here we have the HR manager as our subject and distributed as the verb. And the HR manager is at the front of the sentence, followed directly by the verb, showing who is doing the action. That is the main thing to look for when you're using academic writing, is to look for who is doing the action. Can you easily tell that, and can you tell that quickly? If so, you're most likely using active voice. Verbs that take objects are active or passive. Verbs are active when the subject of the sentence performs the action. Verbs are passive when the subject is acted upon or receives the action. See these two examples. Here's an example of active voice. The manager trains employees. So you have the manager doing the training. That's at the front of the sentence. You have no question about who is doing the training. In passive voice, however, you would say the employees were hired by the manager. So now you've got the person doing the action all the way at the end of the sentence. You've got to wait till the end to find out who is doing the action. You could even leave out that phrase and just say the employees were hired, and you would have no idea who hired them. So that kind of gives you an idea of why active voice is important. That's something we'll talk about in greater detail in the weeks to come. Here you're going to see some more examples of passive voice. The budget will be reviewed by the board of directors. Again, you have the item that is being acted on at the beginning of the sentence, and that is not what you want. You want to have the actor, the person doing the action or the thing doing the action at the beginning. So to fix this, you would move the board of directors to the front, and you would say the board of directors reviewed the budget. Example number 2, the questionnaire was not enclosed. There are several problems with this sentence. One is passive, and the problem that it leads to is we don't know who didn't enclose it. So to fix this sentence would require additional information and obtaining the information of who it was that didn't enclose the questionnaire. An example of active would be, I did not enclose the questionnaire. And if you're the one who didn't enclose the questionnaire, now we know why it's passive, because you wanted to keep that information to yourself. And then here are 3 more. The bell was rung by the principal. The budget statement was prepared improperly. Those are 2. Again, both of those have the items that are being acted on at the beginning of the sentence and the primary actors at the end, or either not in the sentence at all. So you want to make sure that all information is included and that the primary actor is at the beginning of the sentence, followed by an action verb in order to use active, not passive voice. You also want to use proper word choice. This is often referred to as diction. Diction is just a word that means word choice. If you see in your assignments that I give back to you, then I say improper diction, this just means that you need to choose a different word. One thing you want to make sure of is that you always spell out acronyms the first time that you use them. You don't have to spell them out throughout the entire paper. In fact, I prefer that you don't. But on the first use, please do spell them out. An acronym is a term created by using the first letters of the words in an organization's name. Acronyms such as NASA and NATO are pronounced as words. Spell these out first and then refer to them by their acronyms in the rest of the paper. You also want to give a person's full name the first time that you refer to him or her. Thereafter, you can just use the last name. If you have the same name but 2 different people, for example, if you have Kelly Cooper and Henry Cooper and you're talking about both of those, you would want to use full names throughout. One way to make sure that your writing flows well from paragraph to paragraph is to use transitions. Transitions can help to relate one idea to the next. Some good words to use for transitions are conjunctive adverbs. And I'm going to post a grammatical words handout where you can see a short list of these. And here are just a few examples. However, therefore, moreover, nevertheless. Those are simple ways to show the way that ideas connect to one another. Now let's talk about a few good things to avoid in academic writing. You want to avoid second person, you and your. We mentioned that a little bit earlier. First person, I and we. Avoid these unless your instructor, which would be me for this class, asks for the narrative form or allows you to use them in certain essays. Use of these is often permitted in conclusions, but right now they're not permitted at all. Narrative form is used to describe events, usually in the order they happen, as in telling a story. So that is one reason why I, we, you, your is helpful in narrative, is because it's more story-like, whereas academic is more semi-formal. You also want to avoid directives. Do this, do that. The reason for that is because in those, you is the implied subject. So that's automatic second person. Fragments, incomplete sentences, those are not acceptable in academic writing. Run-on sentences, those are 2 or more sentences that are joined without correct punctuation or connecting words. A run-on sentence is not a long sentence. Just because a sentence is long does not mean it's a run-on sentence. This is something many people are confused about. You also want to avoid informal conversational tone. Avoid using slang and idioms. This is probably one of the things that people struggle with most when they're moving into academic writing. You're used to writing for your peers or for informal places such as Facebook, emails with your peers. And when you're writing academically, you want to avoid use of slang. Slang is informal and inappropriate language, especially profanity. No profanity is permitted whatsoever in academic writing for this course. And these words are specific to special interest or specialized work groups. These are also words that are considered cool or in, words that are going to lose their meaning perhaps very quickly. So you want to use tried and tested words that people are going to be familiar with regardless of their background. You also want to avoid using idioms. These are phrases or groups of words that carry meaning other than the literal meaning of the words. For example, putting your best foot forward. One of the reasons for this is because of international students, breaking down international barriers. These idioms do not cross cultural boundaries, so avoiding them is going to keep your writing clear. And also, cliches are usually just thrown in there when you're not sure what to say, so avoid them altogether. And a few more things to avoid. Wordiness. Okay, wordiness can take different forms. Flowery phrasing, using too many adjectives, excessive use of complex terms, redundancy, unnecessary phrases that fill up space but don't add meaning, plus other techniques that increase the number of words but don't add important information. Here's what I want to say about wordiness. When you're writing, think of it as packing a suitcase. You are given a select number of words that you're able to use. And you want to use the words that are going to get your point across in the fewest amount of words possible. Now, that's not to say that I want you to write 3 paragraphs and be done with it when you're writing a paper. This means I want you to use all of the words that you're allotted, and I want you to use them well. Don't just throw in unnecessary words. Don't just throw in adjectives to try and get to the end. 1, I'm going to take off points for wordiness. 2, I'm going to take off points for not getting your point across well. So make sure that you use the words that are going to get your point across and do it in the best possible way. So if you're packing a suitcase, you're not just going to throw in bags of Ziploc bags that are inflated with air just to fill it up. No, you want to make sure that you have all your necessary items in there first. Get the necessary things in first, and then you can fill them in and add some style here and there. But you're never just going to throw in things that are purposeless. Also avoid vague expressions. For example, they, we, people, the company. Who are these people? Who is they? Who is people referring to? All people in the world? What company? So make sure that you're specific so that people can be sure of what you're talking about. Vague expressions include language that is not specific and precise enough for the reader to derive the exact meaning. Avoid these as well. Lists and bullets. When you're in business writing, absolutely, this is fine. But this is a course that is teaching about academic writing because this is your first course for writing for a university. So please avoid lists and bullets. Plagiarism. We're going to talk more about plagiarism later, but it is imperative that you do not plagiarize for thousands of reasons. 1, you'll receive a 0. 2, you will likely be kicked out of school. Plagiarism is improper use of material or use of a source of work written by someone else. It is borrowing, really it's stealing, language or ideas from someone else and not acknowledging or crediting the author or source. You're not going to get counted as plagiarizing if you cite incorrectly. You will be counted as plagiarizing if you do not cite. It is very easy to determine what plagiarized writing is. Please, please, please avoid plagiarizing. If you don't know how to cite, just write the name. We're going to be talking about citing more. Feel free to ask me. I would rather you overcite than undercite. When in doubt, cite. Also avoid a personal style of writing. For example, a writing in which the writer or his or her experiences or observations are the focus. We're primarily going to be using research-based writing. So I want you to make sure that research is the primary focus and not your experience. That is not to say you cannot use your experience at all, but it should definitely not be the primary focus of your writing. This is just an overview of what you're going to be learning. If you have questions, please see me for more information. There are going to be many slides uploaded and several PowerPoints as well and handouts that should be helpful to you. Also remember the Writing Center at Charleston Southern is available for your use and they would be happy to see you there. I'm always available via email and I have my office hours listed on the syllabus as well as I'm available on Google Chat via P. Kelly Cooper. So please remember the main thing, try to be as clear as possible, don't throw in unnecessary language, and write with purpose.